I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gonna teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Hey, I did talk with Mike Washington personally on Saturday. We had a good long conversation. I gave him his letter of reprimand, but he stood tall. He did have some questions, but he had some notes of references. But he took it big time, and he'll be coming back. It's just a letter of suspension, if you would. But with that being said, welcome to episode 669 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast, the show that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports for institutions large and small, from the NEIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. In short, we just call it HBCU sports pedagogy. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host for today, which is none other than Charles Bishop and A.D. Drew. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to K-Sway's 12:30 a.m. studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, multi-Hall of Famer that is, Ralph Cooper, in a beautiful home at Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. That being said, let's bring on Charles and AD so we can get started today. As we're bringing them on, let me go with you, Charles. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Doc. Doing well. Another summer day. Jump into a lot of interesting topics as the world of college athletics is changing before our very eyes.
So you say we have something to talk about.
We got a little something to talk about.
All right. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency, LLC. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting, educational consulting, and data analytics. With that being said, AD Drew, how are you doing today?
Man, you don't realize how much you rely on the internet until the day you decide to go to work. There is no internet at work. So, yesterday I worked remote. They said the internet worked fine at the office yesterday. Today was my day to be in the office. No internet. I did better staying home today. But it is what it is, especially when you do what I do with graphics and stuff like that. Not good trying to hotspot a computer off a cell phone.
Exactly. I was going to say the only thing worse than not having internet is not having full power.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's worse because you had to be there and try to figure things out, do hotspot type things. If you don't have power, you go home and they ask you to work from home. Well, I'm not going to say that's worse because you're still working. You're just working from home. It seems like a big deal. It seems better. At the end of the day, think about this. You're using your own electricity. You're using your own online Wi-Fi that you pay for to do the company work that the company does pay you for, but it's even more on your dime. So,
but I don't have to spend my gas as long as you tell me not to come to the office. Unlike today, which I did have to spend my gas to come to the office.
That is true.
And lunch is downstairs because all I have to do is go to my own refrigerator instead of going to the caf or going off campus to a restaurant.
Well, what happens if you come to work and then you lose power and then you have to go home? So now you. With that being said, as we go back and forth with our worst. Charles, good to have you. AD Drew, good to have you. Do have some tough news to jump on. We'll say this quickly and get into some other news because we'll find out more about it as time comes. FAMU athletic director placed on leave after surrendering to face larceny charges. Aline County Sheriff's Office spokesperson told the station that Angela Suggs faced warrants for alleged fraud and larceny following a Florida Department of Law Enforcement investigation. Ms. Suggs was allegedly said to have misused her FSF, which is her previous employee issued credit card to make wire transfers and cash withdrawals and personal purchases totaling more than $24,000. And I say allegedly because everybody has their day in court, which seems to be a lost thing around our country at this time. So I wanted to make sure, as we put this out there, that we use the word allegedly, so people have their day to see what that looks like. And sometimes we do have overzealous prosecutors out there, but it is what it is. With that said, let's move on into some other news, those certainly on a brighter note. Charles, what else is on your mind in terms of some HBCU sporting news? I will say this before I let you jump in there. We're going to take the last 3 segments. We're going to do kind of some rapid fire, deep discussion amongst us that looks at the House and NCA settlement. I would encourage our listeners that had not seen it when I had a chance to be a guest on the Sports Wrap with AD and Brian, where we took a deep dive and I actually went back into some historical frameworks. We won't get into the historical frameworks today. We've done that. And if you want to hear that kind of nature, which really tells you the reason why colleges use the term college students, which goes back to the 50s, we trace things back to the history of HBCUs from the late 30s, certainly through the 40s to the 50s, and rode all the way up, if you would, to where we are today and how that came forward. So if you want to get a little more insight in that, if you haven't seen it already, go check out DCSN Sports Wrap with Brian and AD, where I got a chance for the last third of the show to really take a deep dive with rapid fire questions. We will answer some of those questions on this show that Drew snapshotted me that we didn't get a chance to on the show. With that being said, take it away. Charles, what's on your mind?
Yeah, let's take a look at the 2025 class of the Black College Football Hall of Fame as they enshrine a great class this past weekend. Let's take a look at the 6 new members who were enshrined. Each represent a different chapter in HBCU football history. We start with Grambling State's Henry Dyer, who was Grambling's first 1,000-yard rusher, was a first-team All-SWAC selection from 1963 to 1965 when he led the nation in scoring with 110 points. He was drafted in the 4th round of the 1966 NFL draft by the Los Angeles Rams. Rasheed Mathis from Bethune-Cookman University, he was a 3-time All-BIAC first-team honoree. He excelled as a defensive back from 1999 to 2002 before a distinguished NFL career. Jaquay Nunnally from Florida A&M. Nunnally was a standout wide receiver for the Rattlers from 1997 to 2000, known for his record-setting catches and electrifying play. Dominic Rogers Cromartie representing Tennessee State University. He started as a defensive back from 2004 to 2007 and later became a 2-time NFL Pro Bowler. J. Scott Walker from Howard University. The dynamic quarterback led Howard to new heights in the early 1990s and remains a revered figure in Bison football history. And finally, Coach Fred Pop Long from Wiley College, a coaching legend. Long's career spanned over 4 decades from 1921 through 1965, leaving a lasting impact on Wiley College and Black college football as a whole. So that was your class of 2025. There was also 2 players who were spotlighted. Jada Byers from Virginia Union. He received the 2024 Black College Football Player of the Year award, earning the Deacon Jones Trophy for his remarkable season. Kobe Durant from South Carolina State and Los Angeles Rams. He was named the 2024 Black College Football Pro Player of the Year, an honor presented by the NFLPA. And then Jackson State football was honored as the HBCU Team of the Year, and head coach T.C. Taylor was recognized as the Coach of the Year. So, star-studded night for the Black College Football Hall of Fame.
Congratulations to all those Black College Football Hall of Famers. Want to give a special shout out to Jay Walker. I seen him as he was doing the championship game for the SWAC championship game, baseball tournament, I should say, in Birmingham, Alabama. And obviously, we've had a chance to chat it up over the years. So I've grown to have a very cordial relationship, more than just professional. So I wanted to personally shout out Skywalker, as they like to talk about in terms of Jay. And the rest of the Hall of Famers are well deserved. I like the way you broke it down, Charles, talking about how it took place and honored folks over different eras in Black college football when we talk about the history of the sport and the history of HBCU programs connected to it. With that being said, let me go to you, Drew. What direction do you want to go in terms of your news of the day?
Just got to do a sidebar. You mentioned talking to Jay at the SWAC baseball championship. A lot of people don't know Jay Walker was a hell of a baseball player back in the day, also. And I think he may do baseball color as well, if not better, than he can do football color at some points in time. So, because it's a hidden skill that nobody really knows about, and I've listened to him over the last couple of years on the SWAC championship game. So, just wanted to throw that in about Jay Walker,
particularly for Angels. Yeah, thank you. Shout that out. As you were tested that day and wasn't allowed to answer.
I know, right?
Off the record, for those that don't know how serious Charles is about it, as he does play-by-play himself and does a fine job at it. Shout out to Dr. Michael Prince that gave Charles Bishop some love on his streaming platform in regards to those that are in the business. But those that follow baseball, like yourself, Drew, yourself, Charles, really can appreciate somebody that can do a good game of baseball in terms of telling you different things. Because there's certain things, even like that you think are just innocuous to the game. When somebody takes a swing and the ball dribbles out, in the vernacular of baseball, that's called a swinging bunt. It's not just a bunt. And so those little things that folks that follow the game mean a lot. You know, how you talk about a stolen base, how you talk about a player making a play, and doing the numbers when you call it a double play versus just saying double play, letting folks that are watching really feel it, because a lot of old heads listen to the game on radio, streaming, and it's one of the few platforms, if you do listen to it like that, you have to hear certain things or you can't get the picture. So a great point made by both of you on that. Shout out to Jay as he gets it done, and the other ones that are doing well, playing some calls. We saw Drew when we had the Black College World Series with Brian. They still to this day have a magical call that is part of our commercials. It excites me every time I hear it, just because it takes you to those places where you remember stuff. And now having a son that plays baseball and takes it very serious, where he comes home, turns on the Major League Baseball channel, which is just sometimes I'll be like, all right, that's enough. But fun. With that being said, good information. Good information. Go ahead.
I was going to get to my story of the day. My best baseball call was not even on an HBCU game. I'll say that for another day and another story.
Nice.
But this is something that saddens my heart, Dr. Cavil, is when our HBCUs decide that they need to cut sports, especially emerging sports that there aren't a whole lot of HBCUs that are doing. You think about lacrosse, you think about wrestling, you think about swimming. Those are some of the sports where only select HBCUs do. And then we have Fisk. We know Talladega cut their program last year. Fisk will be cutting their program after the 2026 season. This comes from HBCUsports.com. The HBCU gymnastics world will soon be down to, he said one program. I think there'll be no programs after the 2026 season.
That's correct.
As Fisk announced they would discontinue.
Well, no, I think you have the one at Morgan State now. Didn't they? Or Central State, somebody up in the Midwest. They call it like tumbling or something like that, but essentially it's gymnastics.
Okay.
That's probably the one they're talking about.
All right, it would have to be because we know Talladega shut down last year.
Correct.
While we are tremendously proud, this is a quote, while we are tremendously proud of the history of our gymnastics program has made to strengthen our impact in the HBCU Athletic Conference, said Fisk Director of Athletics Valencia Jordan. Fisk is grateful for the hard work, dedication, and tenacity of gymnastics staff members and coaches who made this program possible. Fisk was the first HBCU to announce a gymnastics program in 2023, followed by Talladega, and Wilberforce may be the other one you're thinking about, Dr. Cavil. Morgan Price, the 2024 HBCU Sports Female Athlete of the Year, won a national championship at Fisk, but she will be transferred to the University of Arkansas for her final year of eligibility. I do want to shout out Fisk for one thing, Dr. Cavil.
Sure.
Normally, when athletics departments decide to shut down programs, they usually shut them down effective the end of that athletic season, which for us would have been June 30. So the fact that they kept it around for one additional year to allow students the opportunity to graduate or to find a place to transfer, I want to commend Fisk and their board for being able to find the money to keep it going for 1 year, even though this may be a dying program at that institution.
Yeah, it's unfortunate we couldn't at least had one opportunity where all three programs came together to have competition while they all had the sports. But certainly hate to see Fisk Gymnastics. They gave us a lot of great news, but I always knew going into that was a expensive sport, and I was a little concerned. I know you get the seed money, but how do you find a way to keep it going? I do want to say this before we take our first break. You know, Charles, after Jackson State program that you have history with and connecting to in many ways, won the Celebration Bowl and the National Black College Championship, including Dr. Cavil's National Championship. You know, that morning I had a chance to go into the portal. And so before I go back into the portal, start out this season, I wanted to be in there one last time and give an official shout out to Jackson State football program that was honored by the Black College Football Hall of Fame, particularly the head coach, T.C. Taylor. So I can say my head coach, T.C. Taylor, if I go back to this portal and have to pledge my allegiance as we're getting ready for this football season to Prairie View A&M University down there, or Texas Southern University here. You know, I'm kind of split, but before I put all my marbles in like that. So just wanted to give that final announcement. Now I can say I'm back in the transfer portal since we're talking about the House versus NCAA settlement. Thought it was a perfect time to make the official announcement, but shout out to T.C. Taylor and congratulations to my head football coach. Before we take this break, when I take this break, we'll come back on the other side and I will be in the portal. Let's take this break and come back on the other side and talk a little bit about the NCAA House settlement.
We walking down to compliance to get the paperwork done right now, everybody.
Keep it legal now. We don't want no problem.
Right.
There's a shot.
That might be.
It could be. Right field. Grand slam. What a shot. That's how you get hot, young fella.
Thank you guys for what you do for HBCU athletics. This is a fantastic avenue for all of us. This is our ESPN, so we love what you guys do. All you guys at BCSN, we really appreciate what it is that you guys do for us.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KeaversVoice.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
This is Brian Fulford. A.D. Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Football fans, HBCU football is back in the ATL with the Cricket MEAC SWAC Challenge Kickoff. Representing the MEAC, North Carolina Central, and representing the SWAC, Southern Eagles, Jaguars, the Marching Sound Machine, the Human Jukebox. The kickoff trophy is up for grabs, and bragging rights are on the line. The rivalry is real. Bring the family and join us pre-game for the fun-filled Coca-Cola fan experience, including band jamborees, food, activations, and fellowship. For tickets and information, visit MEACSWACChallenge.com.
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a lot, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. We're here with Professor Bishop and Professor Drew. Since we're going to get into a lot of this on the business side, we're going to see if we can do our best way to take you to school and get some updates. We'll give you the talk. If you've been asleep under a rock, you may not have heard the fact that the settlement that many people have talked about off and on, particularly for the last month, which was a settlement in a loss case that was from House versus NCA. Well, it's been settled. It's settled by the U.S. District Judge Claudia Wilkin, gave the green light to agreement reached between the NCA and the plaintiff in this case, which was pushed out by an individual by the last name House, which is how you do cases. It resolves 3 federal antitrust lawsuits alleging that NCA unlawfully restricted student athletes, I like to call them college athletes, ability to earn money. So again, the substance of this case was really about the NCAA unlawfully restricting student athletes' ability to earn money, which has been going on for a while. We talked about where things kind of came out and changed direction when the Supreme Court ruled against the NCAA in regards to academic financial money that they said the NCAA was holding out. You even had one Supreme Justice that talked about, in a lot of ways, the NCAA was acting like a collusion. And many journalists, researchers over the years talked about that and the fact that they had pushed the idea that they were. Many economists, those professors and not, were talking about the fact that they were doing that when they were putting out the value of some P5 at the time. Autonomous 5 is what the NCAA call them, those athletes playing in sports like football and basketball. But it was a multi-billion-dollar settlement. Many people said if the NCAA didn't settle and took this to court and lost, that essentially the NCAA would go bankrupt, losing all the money they had. So that wasn't a real option. And that's when you started seeing major negotiations take place. But we want to talk about it today in these last 3 segments in regards to HBCUs. Again, you can go back and really get a framework what all this is about if you go to Sports Wrap with Brian and AD to get the particulars of the big picture. We will talk about the big picture, but we're going to focus today on how this may affect HBCU programs, specifically those at the Division I level. Finally, let's start it here in terms of the cap. Annual cap is expected to start at roughly $20.5 million per school year for the 2025-2026 and increases yearly during the decade-long deal. It's anticipated that it will increase in the final year of this, which is 34-35 to $32.9 million, which is about a 4% increase each year for those that want to do the business calculation of that.
Cost of living, basically.
Basically, it is. Great point when you say that. So before we open it up and get into some key points that I want us to discuss, and we're going to have this as a discussion point so you can answer questions, you can ask questions, those in the chat, you're welcome to do that. But we have some that put up there, and I want to kind of start here. Jamie Walker asked on Sunday, will commissioners of the conference, in conjunction with the president, set the parameters for opting in or opting out? No, the presidents of the institutions will make the decisions with their board in regards on whether they will opt in or opt out. They will not do it as a conference. The conference commissioners will ask institutions their framework about what that looks like. The SWAC and the MEAC, as Division I HBCU programs, have encouraged a lot of their institutions to opt in, so everybody will be on the same page, even if they set some guidelines of what that looks like. But you won't see this a case where you'll have a mandate from a conference to say you got to opt in or opt out.
Like the
legal
CAA.
ramifications if you do that in terms of that. Now, all the schools can come together and decide they want to do it, and then the conference can make the statement that all presidents for whatever decided to opt out. And you've seen that with the Ivy League, where they all got together and said, we're not going to participate. So each school opted out, therefore the conference in itself opted out. So you see that from that perspective. Do you expect teams to be cut due to finances? Yes. Jamie Walker asked it again. Drew just talked about some cuts that were outside of this. As expenses come out, and you got to think about this, obviously, what we're hearing from the Department of Education and how it may be cut. We've already heard institutions having grants being pulled. And so the first line of the institutions academically, so some of the money that they may have decided to put in athletics, they may have to pull back. Some people may use this as an excuse to decide that they're going to pay some money in one area and then cut sports. You still have an underframing of Title IX that you have to consider. We'll take some quotes from HBCU Sports. They got the Maryland Eastern Shore AD on to talk a little bit about that, to give you some indication of what their thoughts there. Blue Jacket for life. Are there roster limits in D2? No. D2 is not a part of this D1 discussion. They will operate essentially how they are, but we'll have to see what that looks like. And I'm going to get to you, Charles. I see you have off the bot, but I want to kind of get through these. Are the roster limits D2? I answered that. It's all about how much you have in your budget to fund towards the scholarships. What will happen to make us have more funds available opposed to less with the current defunding movement? Great question. This is where institutions will have to become more innovative. Again, money that used to pay back the loan that schools would get to operate athletics. For example, sponsorships, game guarantees. Now that money, because it didn't come directly from the institution, can be used to go back to the institution, pay down some debt they want, or now they can use some of that funds to go directly to the athletes that help generate it. And that's mostly what you'll see a lot of institutions do. We've seen Jackson State, other institutions that's followed in terms of HBCUs, but they were one of the front ones out there that talked about putting extra surcharges, for lack of better words, on the tickets with that specific money. If folks are paying extra, that will go to individuals. So that's another way to look at it. So with that, Charles, let me go to you for the question that you wanted to get on the table.
Okay, philosophically, and we talk about whether to opt in or opt out. I got asked a simple question. Is it time to just completely reimagine HBCU athletics from the standpoint of even going through the whole rigmarole with staying at the Division I? Is it not better to take a look and reimagine HBCU athletics at the Division II level? Because if we're still looking at what the transfer portal is going to be, some of your better athletes are going to be there at your school, and the potential is for them to go somewhere else and make money. So do you even play around at the Division I level anymore?
Well, I think there's two parts of that, because the first thing you open up and say, is it important to reimagine what athletics looks like? I think this settlement is forcing us to reimagine what athletics looks like, first of all, to your point. But I think it's always important to do thought exercises in terms of innovation, new practice, whatever. But if you're asking my opinion in regards to whether member institutions in the SWAC and or MEAC and independent HBCUs that play at the Division I level or the conferences itself will reimagine what it looks like, I doubt it, because I think they've been in the Division I so long, it's hard for them to do it. I think people on the outside, and maybe if you get new leadership, whether it's presidents or a commissioner, you might have that thought exercise. But no, I think these folks are too wedded to the framework of the NCAA to really do radical changes, as you're talking about leaving it. The other thing is even if you decide to leave it, you still have to have some operational process. And that's going to take place regardless. And that's going to take investment. So you're still going to have to come up with some money to invest in terms of what a new model would even look like. Whether that is not really a new model and moving to Division II or moving to NAIA, or is it a completely new model where you're moving out of it and looking more at the intramural level? But again, what is the functioning body and what does that look like? And now you're talking about, in this case, if you're talking about SWAC, you're talking about 12 presidents and chancellors on the same page making that decision at the same time. And I'm not sure if that's realistic from that perspective.
So the second question I was asked was opting in and what that means in terms of, I think there was a provision within opting in where former athletes will get an opportunity to get some restitution from the settlement. And so the question was asked, does that still, if you're opting in, does that apply to your SWAC, MEAC schools? And specifically, I had, parents of players who played, 4 or 5 years ago within the time frame. Will they receive any sort of restitution from, playing during the time they played?
Not a dime. I'd make it even worse. Not a penny. Mm-hmm. They don't get anything. The agreement was, in the lawsuit, was to the Power Five. So they are on the hook to pay the money, where the Power Five did their usual U.S. Marketing framework. I'll put it that way, using business practices that we've seen in this country here with different sub areas in this country around the world, is they were able to do a power move where they spread the money between all 31 Division I institutions. But 60% of the money will come from there and 40% will come from the other conferences. I'll get a chance to maybe get into the split financially, what that looks like. But essentially, every school will pay in to the pot for those 5 schools, 5 conferences at the time, because when this lawsuit took place, Pac-12 was still a power conference. So those member institutions, even though they moved, are part of this. So they pay it out. But the agreement resonates nearly every one of the NCAA's 1,100 member schools, boasting nearly 500,000 athletes, 500,000. NCAA President Baker said the deal opens a pathway to begin stabilizing college sports in his position. But multiple HBCUs such as Morgan State, Maryland Eastern Shore, North Carolina A&T, and Hampton, through association with the CAA, have agreed to opt in to the House settlement agreement and spoke about it publicly. So to answer that part of your question, what does it mean to opt in? To take a deeper dive. The institutions that opt in will also be subject to new roster limits and scholarships. We'll get into that particular shortly in terms of what those roster limits could be or look like, but what do we mean by roster limits? So don't think about this as scholarship limits, which is traditionally what we've discussed for 20, 30 years, how long you've been following sports. where we used to talk about 63 scholarships for FCS football, for example. That no longer is the case. You're going to have to look at it in terms of roster limits. You can break those roster limits up in different ways. You can decide how you're going to provide scholarships within that roster limit. You still have those guidelines, but you need to really look at this more in terms of roster limits and the scholarship guidelines compared versus what we were used to doing. So again, this is $2.8 billion. And so while the power conferences, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, and Pac-12, to name them specifically, will automatically be bound by the terms of the settlement, schools outside of those conferences have the choice to opt in or out of the settlement. Schools that opt out will not be able to directly pay players through revenue sharing. So that's the difference in why some schools decide they want to opt out, because they don't want to have anything with the idea that they're going to share revenue with players. If you opt in, you're going to have to come up with some formula, right, of where you're going to pay players. But this will only exist with players coming in and moving forward. 2025 to 2026, I will say even this first class, they probably will not get the money when you're talking about FCS schools outside of the Power 5. Next year is when you'll probably see these schools preparing to play players, particularly how well they do when other schools come after them to pay them money. But there's a quote by HBCU Sports from the Vice President of Athletics and Recreation, Tara A. Owens, from Maryland Eastern Shore. She quoted saying, "The decision to opt in to settlement allows for financial support and revenue sharing to give student athletes a real opportunity to earn income while acknowledging the time, talent, and energy student athletes bring to Maryland Eastern Shore," was her end quote. She also was quoted as saying, "We continue to explore all avenues to establish and maintain competitive teams while providing an optimal college experience for the student athletes." Owen said the decision, quote, "will not increase financial investment from the university makes to athletics." So that's one institution, but it's one that you can glean that you're not looking necessarily at the university paying more into athletics. You're talking about athletic programs find a way to increase their own revenue. Again, I said some of those examples are taking revenue from game guarantees, classics, money. So you asked a question a couple of years ago, maybe we need to go back to classic models. This may be a reason to look at classic models, because now you can use that money specifically, depending on what it was, to help now provide that type of money to athletes where you are from that perspective. Go ahead, Drew. Good point. Time to follow up with a question before I take the next break and get into some other discussion, further discussion on this area, I should say.
Now, I know we've seen this with big boy basketball. I think there was a tournament out in Vegas where they paid the athletes NIL money in lieu of or as part of the total package to pay those teams to come out there and play. And these were two P5s. I can't remember who it was.
Yes.
But are we going to see more things outside the box like that? You know, can we take our football classic model and instead of, I'm just going to throw out a number, instead of a $5 million payout to each school, they take $1 million of that and use that as direct NIL to the players and give the other $4 million to the school. To, you know, or we going to see other creative things like that, because you could do the same thing in basketball with some of these classics that we play, the Chris Pauls and Michael B. Jordans and things like that. I'm just throwing some things out. We possibly with some of the baseball classics that we see, the Swingman classic and the Andre Dawson. I'm just trying to think of more creative ways that we can encourage these revenue sharing, because what I'm afraid of that's going to happen is if we don't come up with something unique like that, we are going to cut our nose off to spite our face. We're going to opt in, but we're not going to have anything there to give out once these kids opt in, because I said it Sunday, I'll say it today, I'll say it next week, and I'll probably be saying it next year. The $20.5 million that they're talking about is more than every budget in HBCU sports, number one. And number two, it's kind of tough to justify giving out NIL when we can't even give cost of attendance to most of our student athletes right now. So
right, and I think that's where you have to wrap your head around this. You have to be careful to look at the $20 million. While that, remember, that's the maximum you can get. Yes. You can give anything under that. So be careful about comparing the $20 million, which is what you'll see the Power 5 institutions seek for. And I'm not sure if even outside of maybe the Big 10 and the SEC, that even in the ACC and the Big 12, you may see what we refer to as the Power 4 now. What I say is the Super 2 and the Power 2, and why I separate them. I could imagine there'll be some schools, particularly the first year, that do not maximize at the $20 million.
I guarantee it will be less than 20 schools in that with that $20 million.
Right. But the point that I wanted to get to is when you think about the HBCUs, which is a good article, you can go check out the full articles because I'm taking bits of this and also adding different other stuff, different places. But Morgan State provided information that Morgan State is expected to contribute $230,000 to the settlement fund and reduce football roster size to add Olympic sports to remain in compliance with Title IX. So you see unique things like that. What I imagine what you'll see from HBCUs is they may take $100,000, $200,000, $250,000 that they can pull together from sponsorships, surcharges on tickets, game guarantees, and they may make a pool of $200,000 up to $1 million that they can pull out of resources somewhere, right? So you can see them doing anything around $200,000, maybe up to $1 million, and they'll use that to provide some additional funding to athletes at their institution, which gets us into another conversation in terms of how this will start looking at contracts. I don't think they'll use the word contracts because that leans to when you start thinking about, yes, there'll be agreements. What we use and faculty, we use appointment. Charles, as he came on as the adjunct professor, he gets a faculty appointment letter, right? I get a appointment letter. So you'll probably use some type of terms like that, agreement, appointment letters. Essentially, it'll be a skinny way of saying a contract agreement that ties a player, if he's going to get this additional money, that he may be tied to the institution for 2 years. Like that. And the thing is if he decides to leave, you heard coaches talking about the buyout. Well, now you have a way to do that. Yeah. With tying that, if you do leave, you will have to pay back this portion of the money. You won't have them pay back everything, but they might pay back 30% or 40%, 50%. So they'll get that technical for parents and stuff like that to understand where this is going from that perspective. So, yes, I think you'll see those options out there where programs will get very creative. But I do want us to think about that. Even though you opt in, it's not saying that you're going to do the $20 million up to it. So you may have a school from the SWAC. You see Maryland Eastern Shore said they opt in. They might opt in this first year. They may say that we came up with $100,000 and we're going to decide how we split that. They may use a similar formula that you see the power schools using, where they're saying like 80% of the revenue will go to football, 10% will go to basketball, or 15% to basketball, and 5% to the Olympic sports. You may see some programs where they'll rotate out, where they'll over a 5-year period where these sports will get the money. You might have one in terms of football program and then one Olympic sport get money one first year. Second year, you may see basketball and another Olympic sport get some money. So you might have a split where coaches are able to say, all right, from an AD, you have this pool of money, and now you can use that to make deals with players in terms of money they can earn. And so the more value you are, quarterback positions probably will have a little more value than our offensive line in terms of the marketplace. And that's where it gets to. We'll take this next break. We'll come back the other side and talk a little bit about 7 key components. We touched on some of them, but which will get us into some other breakdown in terms of NIL restrictions that will go into NIL Go and things of that nature. So let's take our next break. It'll be our last break. Come back on the other side, and we'll finish up the show with a segment to talk a little bit more of these areas. And then we'll get into some questions where we can go in terms of what are some outlooks that we may look at in terms of what's next. Let's take our last break and come back on the other side.
I'm returning to Clinton Paris, and Tampa's my community. I grew up here, went to school here, and my wife and I make our home here. What makes Tampa special are its people. So when I represent someone injured in my community, it's personal. Call my office and speak to a real lawyer and not some referral service. I will fight the insurance companies to get the settlement that you deserve. At the law office of Clinton Paris, we take the pain out of being heard.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Sugar Chateau Desserts is a specialty bakery located in the Charlotte, North Carolina metro area. We will create delicious and one-of-a-kind treats for any occasion. Sugar Chateau is currently shipping cakes in a jar, offering a variety of different flavors in a single-serve container that can help you celebrate in accordance with social distancing. Place your orders today by calling 803-526-7895 or visiting sugarchateaudesserts.com.
You're looking for the latest information on Southern University sports, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, and HBCU athletics. There's only one place to go. Tune in to the Carlos Brown Show, exclusively on the Black College Sports Network.
Attention football fans. The Cricket MEAC SWAC Challenge kickoff is back in Atlanta on August 23rd. Representing the MEAC, North Carolina Central, and representing the SWAC Southern. Join us at Center Park Stadium for a full day of tailgating, football, and band. For more information and tickets, visit MEACSWACChallenge.com.
Compress the analytic data with your hip-hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want to lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gonna teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab. I did want to point one more thing, as you said, AD Drew, about some of these classics that are out there. You know, in some ways, you know, Dr. Wes Bellamy, the CEO of the Black College Invitational Championship, BCIC, may have been a little bit ahead of the curve. The language now that you could do is one of the things he was doing in that program is that he was going to pay institutions to come play in that tournament. And some of that would have been money that you could have used to play the players in terms of NIL money. The question is how do you set it up? Because those kids obviously opt out. So you might need to do some of that up front now coming into the season, saying if you win the regular season type of things like you see folks do for the NIT. Where the conference now will guarantee if you win the regular season, don't win the tournament, or come in second place, whatever, that you will go to the tournament, you will get this amount of money, and part of that money will go straight to players. That may be enough to entice them, particularly if you contractually do those agreements. So yes, some of these classics now we're going to be in positions where ADs have the ability to really get into some fine details of what it may mean to help support this thing. But let's do this. Let's go back and review a little bit of what we went over. We talked quite a bit, a lot of questions, a lot of stuff that was updated. We talked about revenue sharing and athlete compensation. We looked at it in terms of direct payments to athletes. We talked about the cap increase. We talked about allocation of funds. We didn't talk about this, but we will cover it. Third-party NIL deals. That question is asked, and so we did talk about the fact that NIL deals will be still available from the third-party term, but the thing is now they will have to go through what's called the CSC, the College Sports Commission, or NIL Go, which will review third-party NIL deals up to $600. Anything above, I should say, $600 or more, to ensure they meet what they call fair market value. Now, that's a whole nother can of words. We won't get into that. We'll maybe do that a little more on Thursday to talk about fair market value, because I see Charles' teeth natting up as he teaches sport marketing and saying, how you going to tell somebody what their fair market value is? Yeah.
Your fair market value is what you can get paid.
Right. But that was part of the deal. So you will have Deloitte out here talking about that. Okay. Real fast. We also talked about financial relief for past athletes, who gets paid and who's eligible. Power 5. We talked about those 5 conferences. But we did not say that was $2.8 million. 60% of that, as I said, is coming from the Power 5 institution. 40% is coming from the other 31 conferences, Division I, which is where the SWAC itself will have to pay $30 million. And that is going to be split amongst the institutions. And that's why you may have heard some ADs talking about they are trying to find $300,000 for the next 10 years to help pay off their part of it. Damage claim, the payment will be distributed over 10 years, prioritized to athletes in football, men's and women's basketball. And the next part is a little bit about rules, reforms, and oversight. Elimination of scholarships. NCAA scholarship limits for college sports are being eliminated, replaced by roster limits. So that's a little bit something different. We touched on a little bit roster limits. New roster limits will be established, and schools opting into the settlement must comply with these limits, meaning they can't surpass them. They can go under them. NIL enforcement, a more structured NIL enforcement system will be implemented to include arbitration rights for student athletes and rules around payment from individuals and entities associated with school athletic programs. That's something that you may not have heard yet. NIL Clearinghouse, a third-party entitled entity called NIL Go, will be established to track and evaluate third-party NIL deals exceeding $600K to ensure they represent fair market value. That's the Deloitte and Touche. Deloitte, I should say. I forgot they split. I'm so old, I'll go back to that. College sports.
I still say the same thing, Doc.
Exactly.
Deloitte and Touche,
yeah, a new non-NCAA enforcement authority. The College Sports Commission will monitor and enforce settlement rules, and the NCAA will not be in the position where they will be doing cases. That will be hired by the new gentleman they hired, a former Major League Baseball executive in terms of that point. So, again, revenue sharing, $20.5 million starting July 1st, 2025. Same day that you'll see conference training, so we'll see what that looks like. Payback for past NILs, we talked about that. Modified NIL restrictions, elimination of scholarships, neutral arbitration disputes. College Sports Commission and schools decide allocations is the last one I wanted to make sure we got on the table. Individual schools will decide how to allocate the revenue funds among their athletes. The allocation is not mandated, though football and men's basketball are expected to receive the largest share. So, last part. Areas that we did not. Well, go ahead, Charles. Get your question in before we go into these areas.
Sure. So the question I want to ask is, the NIL collectives that everybody contributes towards. If schools are now making the payments to the athletes, where does that leave the NIL collectives? Is there even a use for them anymore?
I think there will be a use for them. The question is how they will be used. Some institutions already see that had really good collectives that were working well.
Mm-hmm.
They had a unique partnership with them, and essentially we've heard that some of those collectives are moving into the institution because they function really well. They will just have to change in some ways how they function. You also sent some information I think is important to get out here. As IRS continues to crack down on NIL collective attempts at tax-exempt status. So you might see them removing the model. They may remove from a tax-exempt organization to a full business organization.
Yeah, LLC of some sort.
You'll see that they've already been studying this because you got to remember they thought this was coming forward. So they already have a lot of folks that have been collectively looking at how things you want to grow in terms of what this looks like. So with that being said, I want to answer that question. But I know, Drew, you had some areas that you wanted to address that you wanted to talk about too. Go ahead and get that out there.
First of all, I want to make this point. I made it on Sunday. I'll make it again today. The $600 threshold. It is important that we all know that the $600 threshold was probably chosen for a specific reason, and that is because that is the IRS threshold as an independent contractor in which you must report income. And that's not $600 per incident. That's $600 on an annual. So if you make over $600 from any single institution, any single entity, you must report that income to the IRS, and you must they will send you a 1099, and you have to fill out your Schedule C on your tax form. So I think that's important to note that number was intentionally chosen to make sure that it coincided with the IRS reporting number. Now, here are my questions. And I thought about these after we had our conversation on Sunday night on the BCSN Sports Lab. Let's start off with number one. Will this NIL space, the players who decide to sell their NIL likeness to their institution, will this slow down the transfer portal? And this is what I'm going to add, say on that why. Now I've sold my NIL to the institution. So, well, let me back up. I sold my NIL to the institution. Can I still go out and either on my own or through the collective or through other avenues do an additional NIL agreement?
Good question.
Let's start off with that.
Great question. Yes, you still have the ability to do your own name, image, and likeness. The only thing that you need to be cognizant of as a college athlete is if that NIL is above that $600 marker that you talked about, then it still has to go to the clearinghouse, the NIL goal for approval. That it is free market. Again, Charles, don't bite your lip. I know you already have a concern with that. But yes, by how they ruled it, yes, you still can go get NIL deals. Now, the question becomes, if you have a collective that still exists and decides to give an NIL deal for $1,000 for going on a YouTube page and asking alumni to buy a shirt, if you give them $1,000, that framework of the deal will be sent to NIL Gold. They'll review it, and if they say that this is somehow within a justified market value, then that collective can still provide that money to the institution, and the institution can support it, move forward. So yes, the details would matter in terms of what that looks like. But yes, you can still go get NILs from alumni that owns a coffee shop, and they want you to help market to get other alumni to patron that coffee shop. Yes, they can provide you, but if it's over $600, then yes. Now the question that's going to be out there is like, what is the period of this $600? Is that $600 for a game? Is that $600 for a month? Is that $600 for a year? So for a semester, that stuff we will have to further dig a little deeper to see exactly when they say $600, is that just per NIL deal or over what period of time, to your point?
All right. Before I get to question number 2, because we got a super chat, I always have to get that in, Dr. Cavil.
Yes.
Thank you, Brother Johnny Thornton, for the super chat. Why should MEAC abdicate D1 status when the MEAC is leading in head-to-head football games against, and I think he means against the SWAC? Let's encourage more MEAC versus SWAC in August and September. I'll leave that to you, Gooding, since he made the tip to Dr. Cavil's inside the HBCU Sports Lab.
I'm trying to make sure I understand, why should MEAC abdicate D1?
There's been some people have been questioning should the MEAC and other institutions drop down to Division II.
No, I've said that a long time ago. MEAC is just fine as long as they stand still and support each other. They're at the threshold that allows them to still be an extremely functioning conference. There's everybody else that wants to see conference churning. That sells a lot because people just talk about it. But in terms of operational platform, the MEAC is in a very good position. Another thing that I don't think people think about is they have less mouths to feed. So even if they're getting in, quote unquote, less money from sponsors, they get the same check for basketball that the SWAC gets, that any Division I schools, but they only split it among 8 schools, while the SWAC is splitting among 12. Who gets the bigger check? That's simple math. So I won't tell you. I'll let you calculate it. So no, I agree with him. I do like the idea of finding ways for the MEAC and the SWAC to work together to find unique ways to partner with conferences or individuals to generate more revenue that can go directly to the players to help compensate that. If they can figure out a way to do it, I think leaning on what a lot of fans would want to see is something that is more important than ever than just going out to try to do the game guarantees or being worried about your Division I record against other Division I. It's going to be more important to make sure that you schedule games and make money, because now you can utilize that money to keep your roster versus just worrying about, particularly in the SWAC and the MEAC, because they have the ability, particularly in football, and you can start it in other ways to do it to some degree, is that they have an ecosystem that fans cater to that is doing really well that other FCS schools do not have. For example, going to the playoffs, we always talked about the money cost to going to the playoffs. Think about that now. That FCS playoffs becomes even more challenging in regards to that you're asking players to do all this, where you can get the revenue to support them to play in that. So the pride of just going to the playoffs, I think, is going to be a lot different than ever before.
All right. Before I get to question number 2, Johnny says, you didn't make that stupid suggestion. I was directed at a slick comment. Forgive me for taking up your time, Dr. Cavil.
No problem. I think we made the best of it.
All right. My question number 2 before I turn it over to Charles is, will we see with players opting in, will we see a slowdown in the transfer portal? Let me explain, everybody.
Good question.
Right now, scholarships are 1-year renewable scholarships. will we start seeing players sign multi-year agreements with said institution? And by having those multi-year agreements, that in theory should slow down the transfer. Let me finish, Charles. Should in theory slow down the transfer portal, because if you sign a player to 2 years or 3 years, you know, with all the buyouts and everything else, that because there is that buyout, that's going to slow them down from jumping from school to school to school. In theory, Charles. Now, once again, will we see it? Will we slow it down? And first of all, will we see multi-year contracts first, agreements first? Then, if we do see multi-year agreements, will it slow down the transfer portal, especially for those star athletes or those athletes? We take this for HBCU institutions who come to HBCUs, get that one breakout year, get that Player of the Year award, and then they decide to go on to another institution.
Charles?
If I'm an athlete, I would stay away from that school because I don't want to be tied down to a multi-year agreement.
Yeah, but
but Charles,
I think to your point, Drew, and I'll take it from here and give some context. I think the players are going to go where the money is. So if you're going to go with the money, I'm not going to give you money without having some agreement. So I don't think you're going to go to a school that's going to give you money without getting some type of agreement. I don't see that. That's not realistic.
Right.
But I think the challenge you'll have is you probably will see churning still pretty heavy at the FCS level. I think you'll see reduction of transfer portal, if you would. The churning of that is what I was speaking talking about at the Power 5 schools, because they're more likely to give significant revenues. Like they may be giving $50,000 deals, $100,000 deals, or $250,000 deals. They're not going to give $250,000 deals without asking you to sign an agreement that you're going to stay. The problem you have with that, Charles, if one school does it, the other school is going to do it. So you're not going to have your choice to be running around to another school that's going to likely to do the same thing that the schools that are doing in the Big 10 and Big 12. I think it gets a little more challenging when we get to the FCS level because it's going to cost a lot to get the expertise, if you would, for somebody that's going to be able to write up that agreement that will stand in the court. So I think you'll see it less at the FCS level in, mid-major schools, the quote-unquote low major schools, and other sports basketball to get it done. I think you'll see players start to understand what their value is really quick, and they're going to act accordingly based on that value. Mm. So, a big-time star, he may be able, that's looking at getting a $4 or $5 million as a quarterback, he may be able to put in there and negotiate a little bit that, I'll go for you. I'll sign this school for $4 million, but I'm only staying a year. I'm only doing a 1-year deal, and I'll take my chances after that. But another school might say, we'll pay you $8 million to come, but you got to do for 2 years. With injuries in football, you might see the value of signing the 2-year deal to guarantee that you get the $8 million versus being a free agent after 1 year. So you'll start thinking about the same way that you see NFL players and NBA players that think about the guarantee because of the injuries based on the sport will go a long way to kind of determine that part of it.
Can I throw one last point in here? I think you're going to see more kids out of high school in sports like basketball than you will see in football and baseball, where you're going to see more seasoned players, because it's usually a lot easier to see talent at 18 years old for those who still recruit freshmen in basketball than you see in football or in baseball. Football, an 18-year-old body is not the same as a 21-year-old body or a 22-year-old body. Same thing when it comes to baseball. Baseball, the baseball players, when they get about that 20, 21, 22-year-old, that's when we know that they really have that superstar talent. Very rarely does it really show for that freshman that's on campus, a true freshman on campus. So I think those are how those deals are going to be constructed. Just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think you will see something like that, but I think this will be open. You'll see some folks, to Charles' point, that'll get really creative on this, and I think some will kind of stand by the line. I think a lot of that will be based on your brand value. You know, Ohio State can offer a certain type of deal versus what Ohio can offer. And so those schools with bigger boosters may play a different role in terms of what they support the school. So it'll be interesting to see what this looks like. But let's leave it here in terms of considerations, as Drew did a good job just pointing out some areas of not addressed. One of the things that you want to consider is the potential for further litigation. While this should settle things down a little bit, this will not end it. The settlement does not resolve all legal challenges. Issues like college athletes' employment status and potential Title IX implications may lead to further lawsuits. Federal legislation is still out there. The NCAA and conferences are advocating for federal legislation, preemptive states' NIL laws, and potentially grant the NCAA antitrust exemption aiming to greater uniformity and stability is out there. We just heard this past Sunday that the executive House leader was out there playing golf with some folks talking about what do they need to do left in terms of college sports, in terms of Trump. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. You have the impact of different sports. Drew kind of talked about this. The new model may favor revenue-generating sports like football and men's basketball, leading to concerns about the future Olympic sports. I have some general concerns out there. I think less so at the FCS HBCU levels. You may have some sports that kind of trickle out, but I don't think there's a lot of money involved in that, and scholarships are of value for those sports. So if you continue on to play it, I don't think that's an issue. I think you'll see that more in terms of the Super 2 and the Power 2 conferences having to deal with that. The unclear distribution model, the lack of a mandated distribution model for school creates potential for variability in future disputes over how the revenue pool is allocated. So those are some things that I think you're going to look at. I do want to say that the idea that, future Olympic sports or whatever, how that works is going to be important in terms of considering that I never was one of those folks that thought that the money generated by football, basketball, men's and women's now needed to be there to pay for Olympic sports anyway. The government should be paying for Olympic sports if they want to make sure that people are ready to go to the Olympics. So I want to put that out there. Thank you, Jeff Roberts. I appreciate the thought. Can athletics work now?
Athletes, yeah.
I think that's a great question. And yes, I think it'll work now. It changed. We've had changes all the time.
No.
People thought the world was falling.
No, he said athletes, not athletics. Athletes.
Oh, athletes? Can athletes work?
Yes.
I think it would be harder for them to work. They can theoretically work, but I think the work they will be doing is make sure they can get an NIL deal. But you won't see them working
burgers.
Your traditional 9-to-5 type hours or things of that nature. No, they may still get some work study type of things during the off season from that perspective. But no, I don't think you have to worry about them working a 9-to-5 or 4 hour, 20 hours a week job. So with that being said, let's bring it to a close. I think we addressed quite a bit out there. Hopefully enjoyed this. What I'm going to provide a homework session for folks to think about that we might entertain on Thursday to look at another avenue and see if athletics can get into that. Private equity has arrived, college sports. So I want to challenge you all to think about that a little bit and see if we can potentially get into discussion on that on Thursday. Where do you think private equity would go, and can it find its way and trickle down to HBCU programs? In words, private equity. We had that talk last year when Howard University's basketball coach put that out there. It was early. We heard it from the Big 12. It was too early for a lot of schools, but now that this settlement has come up, we've heard now that there actually are 2 institutions that have signed an agreement with a private equity company called Elevate. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. We had a confirmation that people thought it was Penn State and UCLA. They denied it. They had already worked with Elevate, but it's in a different capacity. So that's not there. We've had news from Boise State saying that they believe they will have a private equity deal within the next 6 months. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like and what is the trickle down, to leave a homework assignment for you all to go do some buzz and talk about private equity for HBCU programs. Can we find a way to get into that business? And if we can, is it something that we want to? What does that look like on the frontier? And the last one is up there for us to know the measure and value about supporting your programs as attendance at different basketball games and buying tickets becomes even more important now, more than ever. That being said, thank you for listening inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I know Charles would like that question there. Give him some homework as he smiles and drew a little bit there. I'm Dr. Kenyatta, the Dean of HBCU Sports, come from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday. We're right here at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. We bleed over a little bit, particularly this time of the year, but we go for at least an hour. We look forward to Thursday as we bring back and maybe discuss a little more news in the lab and decide if these gentlemen want to tackle the question of private equity. We'll see if that will be the topic, but if not, we'll do it the following week. Follow me.
I'm going to the bathroom on that one, Dr. Cavil.
No problem. YATTACAVIL as Threads, Facebook, and Instagram. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab on Facebook and YouTube. As Drew said, he's going to take a break. Really big and continue to move forward. We'll talk with you soon. Charles.
Of course.
Drew.
Lecture.
Dismiss.
Travel light, everybody. Well, holla.